Okay, Councillor Stern, you can start, please.
Thank you. Good evening all, welcome to the planning meeting of the 10th of September. That's welcome to the residents, the members in the chamber and the officers. We're going to start very shortly our planning meeting for tonight, which is only one application, which I'm sure you're all aware of. But we'll start by going to the agenda as it stands. And the first item on the agenda, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from councillors Roger Glitheroe, Lance Jones, Jeff Shacklock and Peter Wathen.
Thank you. Next, I ask you to declare any declarations of interest or informal site visits. So declarations of interest first. Any of those? No? Informal site visits then. Councillor Mercer, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jill Mercer and I both drove to this Dun Close to look at the perspective from there a couple of days ago. We did not speak to anyone on site.
Fine, thank you. Anyone else informal site visits? No? Thank you. Can I just remind you of what I said last night at the previous meeting, that you must ignore anything you've had from people who are trying to commit your vote one way or another in the past, and you must make your decisions tonight based upon what you hear tonight and see tonight. If anyone has a problem with that, let me know. Item 3, please, Charlie. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received no questions.
Good. Therefore, we go straight into the planning application. The form, for those that don't know, is that the case officer will start us off with explaining what it's all about and where it's coming from. We will then move to the speakers that we have in the gallery, and then finally we will go to the ward member for his input or her input, and then we'll debate the matter and make a decision. So we start with the officer, which is Dean Wishart. Dean, are you ready?
I am, Chair. If you just bear with me a moment, I'll just share the presentation.
Thank you.
My Teams has been playing up of late, so it may go a bit wobbly on the first attempt.
The sooner we get back to reality meetings, the better.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it just?
And it's frozen just right on cue, just like I thought it might. So if you just bear with me a second, it'll take its time and it'll come back to me. I did send the laptop to IT after it happened last time, but it still hasn't fixed it, so we'll have to try again. Right, so I'll stop sharing. Oh, it's unshared it anyway. Let's try again. Oh, sorry, councillors, my PowerPoint is closed down. I just need to reopen it. Citrix decided it would close down on me at the point I needed to open it up. So apologies for the delay while it opens up.
Okay.
We will get there. We will get there.
Well, there'll be a lot of talking for you if you don't.
Isn't it possible to save these things and then just bring it out of the desktop or something?
Well, if this keeps happening, I think I'll have to start doing that, because it's not ideal because it takes up a lot of data on the desktop, but to have at least the presentation.
You could delete it tomorrow morning, couldn't you?
Yeah, no, I think well, it doesn't stop the Teams problem with the freezing, but it would stop what's just happened with Citrix just now. But I think we should be good to go. So can we see the start slide of that?
Yes, you can.
Excellent. Right, let's get going. Okay, can everyone see the first slide?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay,
yep.
This is application 1800982. Your eyes are not deceiving you. It's a 2018 application. It's one we've had for some considerable time for the land north of Northampton Road in Rushden. The application site is situated between the B645 Northampton Road to the south and the A45 to the north. We have the RPC Containers Factory here, Don Close is here, and there are some residential properties, the Bowls Club, etc. on Northampton Road here. Description of development is as shown on the screen. You'll see that I've highlighted some of the A1s, A3s and B1Cs in bold. The reason for that is because the use classes order, which determines what sort of things like retail and factories, etc., are, that changed on the 1st of September this year. So when the report was written, it was written in August, shortly before the change. So you'll see from the update sheet that I'm proposing to change the description of development to update those use classes. So where you see A1, A3 and B1C, they would be referred to now as Class E under the new revision to the use class system, but that's in the update sheet. It's got the old and new wording so you can compare it. So in brief, the proposals before us this evening is for 16 new units. There would be a supermarket, which is Unit 1, a non-food retail building, which is Unit 2, a drive-through sort of coffee shop, cafe, restaurant, which would be Unit 3, and then a series of what is now Class E, B2 and B8 employment uses, which are Units 4 to 10. Separately to that, you'd have a care home, which would have its own separate access from Northampton Road. It wouldn't be accessed through the rest of the site. You can see towards the bottom of the screen there that 70%, just over that, would be the B and E employment uses. That's E, B2 and B8 with ancillary offices. The remainder would be for retail and the care home. And you can see at the bottom of the screen there, overall, you've got just over 25,000 square metres of floor space provided. This is the site layout, and I appreciate this is a rather large site, and thought had to balance it up between showing you each individual plot one by one, which could take a long time. But given that I imagine a lot of you would have read the report and looked at the parts that are of interest, and we've had the briefing from the applicant as well, I thought we'd just show this one, and if people want me to share various components of this layout, I can do that during the Q&A after this presentation. But just to sort of talk through the layout, there would be a new roundabout from Northampton Road, Unit 1, which is the supermarket, Unit 2, which is the other retail unit, Unit 3 is the drive-through coffee shop, the care home is here, and then the units in sort of lighter orange, and these larger ones here would be the sort of B2, B8 uses. As part of the proposals, there would be improvements to the road network. I've just highlighted a couple here where Northampton Road, this would be the new roundabout into the site, a new crossing to get across from one side of Northampton Road to the other, bus stops on either side. There are also improvements to the junctions proposed with Northampton Road and Higham Road, and Hayway and Higham Road as well, to increase vehicle capacity there. If you were on the A45 roundabout, hopefully not as a pedestrian in a vehicle, this would be the perspective view, Unit 1 being the supermarket, which is anticipated to be an Aldi, and Unit 2 being the other unnamed retailer. Now, the update sheet has quite a few pages on it compared to the draft version I sent around. I think it's 9 pages long, but just to summarise what's on there, there are further representations. We've had those from Waitrose, which relate to traffic concerns. That's reiterating concerns they've raised from earlier on in the process. From the representatives of Kettering's Newlands Centre, they're primarily related to the changes to the use classes order, and it's fair comments they've made in the main, because when the application was submitted, there was no thought that the use classes order would change to prospectively allow retail to become a major use on the site. And you'll see from the conditions on the update sheet, we're actually imposing or intending to impose some additional conditions and to strengthen some of the additional existing conditions to make sure that effectively only units 1 and 2 are retail, and that the rest of the units are to be used for their originally intended employment uses, not for retail. I'll come on to this on the final slide, but also I'm intending to further strengthen one of the additional conditions, because the new use class E also encompasses what would have been called use classes D1 and D2 in the past. So the wording you see in the update sheet, new condition B, we're intending to further strengthen that to include the things from D1 and D2 as part of the exclusion. So basically it wouldn't be able to turn into a gym or a clinic or a healthcare centre, things like that. But I'll be a bit clearer on that on the final slide. We've also had further confirmation from Highways England, because I had spoken to them over the phone about it, but I've now had it in writing just to confirm as of yesterday they are not objecting to the application. You may well have seen in the report and representations received that Highways England are looking at options for the A45 Rushden Lakes roundabout and what to do with it, but that does not have any bearing on this application. They are not objecting to it. We've also had letters from Councillors Peacock and Councillor Maxwell, and Councillor Peacock sent hers in anticipation there may be some technical difficulties. You can see I've already had some of my own, so that letter will be read out is my understanding, and then Councillor Maxwell has submitted a letter as well, which has been included with the update sheet. There have also been further representations from the local community. I think there's 5 additional representations we've had since the report was written. They're summarised on the update sheet where matters have not been addressed in the report already. I've mentioned the additional conditions. The restrictions on uses due to the use class changes are the main changes, but the other one is one to ensure that if TV or radio reception is disrupted as a result of the larger units, that the applicant would have to do remedial works to put it right effectively, and that seems a reasonable inclusion. It was a suggestion by, I think, Councillor Andy Mercer, and a very reasonable one too. There's been also additional information from the applicant since we had the virtual site visit and briefing, with a job creation table shown on the update sheet, and additional tracking and levels information for the A1 supermarket use. You'll see the asterisk on the final bullet points, because depending on which version of the update sheet you've read, I actually made a bit of an error on one of the conditions that the applicant is proposing, and you'll see at the bottom there, it should say opening hours rather than delivery hours. So the more up-to-date update sheet has corrected that in the blue text. I think it's on page 6. The key considerations for this application, which also correlate with the main areas of objection, because there has been quite a lot of objection to the application. As a major application, that is to be expected. It's a lot of development, and it is adjacent to and quite close to residential properties in an area that is already very busy. So, to receive a lot of objection to the application is not a surprise. And I'll just go through some of the key issues as you see on the screen there. The principle of development, which most people I think will appreciate, but not maybe everybody is aware. This application site is allocated in the development plan to be developed for employment uses. So thoughts of not developing it at all, I'm afraid, don't hold any water, because this application site is allocated for development. Whether it's this development or something else, we will see this evening, but it is actually to be developed for employment related uses. It's Joint Core Strategy Policy 35. So similar to the site not too far from here across the road at Northampton Road, where where permission has now been in place for the 80 houses. That again was an allocated site. There was objection to that, but it's a site that will come forward for development. In terms of amenity impact, things such as noise, air quality and visual impacts have all been assessed by various consultees. And this evening we have Mandy Dennis from our environmental protection team, who should be able to answer questions on some of these matters if they get a bit too technical for my knowledge. As part of Joint Core Strategy Policy 35, landmark buildings is one of the criterion in there. And that's something that as officers we do appreciate there's subjectivity amongst that, but we feel that the application being presented to you this evening, units 1 and 2 do have those landmark buildings. It's just important not to get confused between what is a landmark and what is an icon, would be my advice. Layout matters. Part of the reason the application has taken such a long time to get to a committee is there have been various technical matters to resolve, but also we were trying to improve the layout of it as well. And the applicant has been very receptive to advice on various matters, including layout, and the layout is considerably improved from when the application was first lodged. Landscaping is of vital importance also, and there is a sort of large tree belt to the eastern boundary of the site where it sort of meets Don Close and the public footpath, and additional landscaping is proposed along that boundary as well to shield, particularly I think it's Unit 9, which will be the closer ones to Don Close, from being a sort of visual nuisance. But in a wider sense, landscape and visual impact, we've had that independently appraised, and that's come back from the independent assessor as being acceptable in the context of the surroundings. Highway matters are probably where the most objections have come from, people's experiences of Northampton Road and the roundabout at peak times. We know this is a very emotive issue for local residents, and we've gone to extreme lengths to investigate these to make sure that the recommendation we put to you this evening is robust. We consult with our local highway authority at Northampton County Council, but also with Highways England, as they're responsible for the A45. But in addition to that, we've also put those responses to an independent highway consultant to check whether they agree with the rationale that has been put forward by those two consultees. And you'll see from the report that they've come back and they have agreed with those and have effectively said that it would not be reasonable to refuse the application on highways grounds, and we would probably be at risk of costs if we were to do that. So appreciating the local community's concerns about this, we have investigated this as far as we can, I think, from a planning side of things. So it's not that we're trying to undermine people's concerns in any way at all. We've gone through the hoops we need to ensure that the application is acceptable in planning terms on that point. Flooding and ecology, these are matters where the consultees are content with what is being proposed. There's mitigation proposed as part of conditions for flooding, and there are drainage conditions and construction management for ecology. Natural England in particular, given the site's proximity to the SPA, they are satisfied with the development, haven't objected to it. Retail impact is something I've touched on already. 2 units are proposed to have retail in them, one to be a supermarket, one to be a non-food unit. There have been objections from local occupiers, Waitrose from Asda, although albeit Waitrose is more on highways grounds in fairness. I think Asda is probably similar, but we've also had objections from further afield from Kettering about town centre users going in and out of centre location. Similar with highways matters, we've had that independently assessed. We've had an independent assessor look at the retail impact of the scheme, and it has been concluded that this is acceptable subject to conditions which you will see in the report. Some of them will be familiar to members because they have no poach in there as well, which is for members who are interested with Rushden Lakes will be familiar with the sort of wording on that. And as I mentioned a bit earlier on, because of the changes to the use classes order, we now need to put further controls in place to make sure that the remainder of the site doesn't become retail as well, because that was never the intention when the application was made. And this will ensure that that can't happen. And you'll see from Appendix 2 of the report, there's a range of Section 106 mitigation proposed as well. So we consider the application to be acceptable in all the regards mentioned on the screen, and from what you see in the report, which I'm sure you've all read, all 90 odd pages of it, subject to conditions in a Section 106 agreement, we believe the application is acceptable. So the recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions and Section 106 as set out in the report, including the new and updated conditions from the update sheet. And with the asterisk you see on the word new there, just reiterate the point that new condition B on the update sheet needs to be further enhanced to make sure that D1 and D2 uses, as we used to call them, are also excluded as well. So they can't become gyms, clinics, creches, etc. on units 4 to 10. But yeah, the recommendation has not changed despite all the updates. That's all from me for now. Happy to take questions after the speakers. Thank you, Chair.
Dean, thank you very much. Very comprehensive. We now move to the speakers, and I believe there are 6 of them. I haven't got the list of their names here, but my vice chairman, Councillor Mercer, has got the list of the names, and she will ask you to start speaking soon after we've plugged it all in. So Jill, can you put the first one up? You're mute. Jill, you're mute.
Sorry. The first speaker is Dr. Edward Roderick. If he could unmute and start, and one of the officers will time him.
What is he?
For 3 minutes.
Jill, what is he?
Dr. Edward Roderick is an objector.
Thank you. Can you hear us, Doctor?
Can you press star and 6 on your phone, please, Dr. Roderick?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. You've got 3 minutes.
Sorry, Chairman. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I live at 124 Northampton Road, some half mile from the Rushden Lakes development and 400 yards from the proposed entrance of the new development. I was formerly the Group Chief Executive of Christian Salverson, at the time one of the leading logistics companies in Europe, with 5,000 trucks and 200 warehouses. I also sat on a number of government and industry committees on transport and the built environment, so it gives me some expertise on these issues. As you leave the A45 roundabout going up Northampton Road, the first set of lights is only 34 metres away, less than the length of 2 R6 or about 4 cars when queuing. The mini roundabout, which services the supermarket, pub and other industrial areas, is only 50 metres away, again 2 R6. The proposed new entrance for the gateway is a further 100 metres away, followed by 50 metres to the church, and on the opposite side a further 50 metres to the proposed entrance to the 80 houses which have now been approved, and which I understand 75 more are now in application. In another 50 metres is the entrance to the Bowls Club, and in addition to all these major sites are the entrances to the homes of Mr. Paul, Mr. Button's yet to be built bungalow, and 3 other homes. There are 9 traffic event locations in less than 300 metres. 4 of them are major and new. They will be looking to do preparation work on these sites at one and the same time, in addition to the normal traffic. This whole road is on an incline. The maximum torque, power and pollution is in starting a vehicle and is much slower and more polluting for any form of lorry. The work and retail environments were changed before COVID, which is likely to increase local traffic as more people work from home. In addition, in the local towns of Kettering, Northampton and Bedford, the Marks and Spencers and Debenham stores have been closed. As a result, before the phase 2 of the Lakes development and the opening of the cinema, they had exceeded their estimates by 20% with 5 million visitors. Over the next few years and currently, there are more than 20,000 homes in these same towns and in Rushden East, which have been approved and all of which are drawn to the lakes. Northampton Road is now a rat run, and over the last few weeks, in addition to the weekend, Christmas, Easter, and every early morning congestion, we have seen queues in the middle of the day and increasing numbers of noisy commercial vehicles through the night. The whole basis of the calculations for this location are wrong, and as a minimum, a new project, including all of these factors, should be carried out before any decision can be made. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then the next
Can you
speaker
make
is
note of those points to discuss later?
okay. The next speaker, Chairman, is Councillor Angela Gardner from Higham Ferrers Town Council.
Thank you.
Thank
Go on, Angela.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Can indeed.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dear councillors, you will be hearing tonight in regards to an extremely controversial planning application that Higham Ferrers, Rushden, Erthling Borough, surrounding local businesses and the community itself all have valid and strong objections to. As set out in the new government white paper on planning, applicants, planners and councillors need to engage and listen to the needs of their community more. Is this application listening to that? The historic towns this gateway leads to are Higham Ferrers and Rushden. It has already been identified, Policy 35, a need for a high quality landmark building for a positive first impression. There's a supermarket to which there are 3, all in no more than a mile from each other, fulfil that requirement. This development is an overdevelopment that will have a significant detrimental impact on its surroundings and the community living within it. The highway concerns are many. Surrounding infrastructure that will serve this gateway is simply at full capacity, with traffic at standstills, with high risk of emergency vehicles unable to save the lives of the community in surrounding towns. Within this application, there is a proposed 60-bedded unit. This has not been commissioned by Adult Social Services. The care home does not fulfil parking requirements as set out by NCC. 24 spaces for a 60-bedded unit, not included any emergency vehicles or health specialist visitors needed. As set out, living and ageing well by Northampton NCC's priority is to enable people to age in place with support and well-being. This is a private business-led care home and requires negotiation in price, i.e. procurement, for its vulnerable to access, costing NCC thousands. So is a business and industrial park the right and proper place for a care home? so no natural ventilation, i.e. a resident will not be able to open a window due to noise and fumes pollution. But as now stated in the applicant's own letter dated the 11th of the 11th, 19, the residents will require a high level of care. I'm reading the report in its fullest. They are not asking for a residential unit, but a nursing care unit. As stated in 7.104, the applicant clarifies themselves that is not a conventional care home situation. If this is the case, it is a nursing facility, and more information is needed on things such as medical waste, oxygen storage, and all the deliveries needed for a busy daily running of such a specialised unit. So the officer has deemed it fit that a site environment factors does not matter, which means lives do not matter. And as we have seen in the news, lives do matter, even those without a voice. 9.21 in your conclusion states that the proposal will not fully accord with JCS policy 35.
Angela, have you got
yes, sir.
Because you're 3 minutes.
No, I'm finished. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Chairman, is Councillor Paul Harley from Rushden Town Council.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Councillor.
Hello.
Hello, I can hear you. Off you go.
Whilst Rushden Town Council appreciates this site will be developed, we are concerned that the latest application does not fully take into account the significance of this gateway location. This site is visible from the A45 in both directions and is a key site at the A45 Northampton Road roundabout. Since the creation of Rushden Lakes, this has become as an important gateway into Rushden, and therefore full consideration needs to be given to the aesthetics of this site. Imaginative design could have been created an appealing gateway site, but instead a supermarket car park is being proposed to the front of the site. Policy 35A of the Core Spatial Strategy states that a high quality landmark building should be included at the A45 Northampton Road roundabout as a gateway to Rushden. We do not consider a supermarket to be a landmark building. This application does not comply with the current Joint Core Spatial Strategy. Policy 35 states this area is to be allocated for B1 business and B2 general industry employment uses. Therefore, the proposed A1 and A3 development is in direct conflict with the Core Spatial Strategy, and we strongly oppose this. We understand that the proposed development will be marketed in its current form for a period of time, and if there is no appetite, then a change of use to B8 usage will be sought. We do not wish any B8 development to be built on this site at any time. This will be completely unacceptable in terms of location and the fact that Rushden already has an imbalance of B8 buildings within the town. The proposed supermarket application is not compliant with Policy 35G, which takes height, scale, massing and form development should take into account the site topography and need to mitigate visual impact. Significant landscaping would need to be implemented to help mitigate the visual impact, and this does not appear in the current proposal. This scheme is also not compliant with the Rushden Neighbourhood Plan, which states in Policy E5, Northampton Road A45 Junction has been identified as a gateway site, and such consideration needs to be given to scale and height of buildings, use of materials and architectural style. We do not consider any of these items to have been given proper consideration within the submitted plan. Policy E6 of the Rushden Neighbourhood Plan states development proposals within the vicinity of a gateway site which fail to enhance and improve the approach of the town will not be supported. Therefore, we are unable to support this scheme in its present form, as it offers no enhancement to the entrance to the town from Northampton Road. In conclusion, Rushden Town Council are opposed to the development, None of our original objections have been addressed, and this gateway site will not be enhanced by this proposed application. In its present form, it is in direct conflict with both the Rushden Neighbourhood Plan and Core Spatial Strategy, and we therefore have no alternative but to strongly object to this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Jill, the next one, please.
The next speaker is Councillor Dorothy Maxwell, who is a ward member.
Dorothy?
Can you press *6 on your phone, please, Councillor Maxwell?
Dorothy?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
Crack
sorry.
on.
Yes, okay. Right, I'm Councillor Dorothy Maxwell. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents. My comments are now based on real concerns over this site, which was not planned in the North Northamptonshire Core Strategy 2011 to 2031. This development will have a major impact on all the lives of people who live in Northampton Road and surrounding areas. Northampton Road is the B645 road. The research shows from data collected by Waitrose, Asda, Gramies on behalf of Friends of Rushden and Higham that Northamptonshire highways have the incorrect data on traffic. Example, how do 62 staff and families fit into an 18-car space in the nursing home? Noise levels quoted in 6.35 by ENC officer are significant for the residents in the nursing home. It states that noise levels would mean that it would need robust windows for a nursing home and you would not be allowed to open them. How would this affect the residents in Northampton Road and surrounding areas? And the approval of the 80 houses development would also be affected, although there is no mention of this in the report. People should be able to open their windows, not just what message is this sending out. Pollution is a major hazard for vehicles in the built-up area, which Northampton would become. Should we be subjecting school children to health issues? I fear not. Northamptonshire has not commissioned a report into the effects, and nor has the applicant, who are clearly not worried. The Environmental Protection Officer has not objected, but is reliant on mitigation strategy yet to be determined. These normally are dealt with by the planning condition, which rarely effective or enforced. Finally, the development has never anticipated like this in 2011 in the policy. Why warehouses, supermarkets, takeaways, 60-bed nursing home? This presents an application cannot proceed. Committee members, we ask you to refuse it on the grounds of safety, health, pollution, noise, traffic, absence of a landmark building, interruption of Sharnbrook and Rushden Green Corridor. If you're minded to pass this application, you're confirming that town councillors, local businesses, local residents and the NNS planning unit are all wrong. Highways England and highways, Northamptonshire Highways, Screwbridge Roundabout, despite getting it wrong in the past, which we will now have to live with. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dorothy. Next, please, Jill.
Councillor Sarah Peacock, also a ward member.
Thank you.
Sarah.
This site is one of the last remaining allocated sites in the north of the town to apply for planning permission, and it has a specific criterion set out in policy 35 of the JCS, and the Rushden Neighbourhood Plan supports that document. Therefore, how is it possible that developers find it so difficult to follow the criterion? The criterion allocates a mix of B1 and B2 uses. Therefore, why are they applying for B8 by the back door? We're already covered with monstrous B8 units from the north to the south of the county. This is not a suitable site due to the various variations in the land levels, especially in the northeast of the site where the B8 is being proposed, should the B1 and B2 not be taken up. If they cannot fulfil the B1 and B2 requested, then that phase must come back to planning for redetermination. We have an ever-moving feast now, and habits are changing. Road issues have already been raised, and I support that lorries thundering through our towns at all hours must be prohibited by weight restrictions and directional signs from day one. This should be a condition and enforced. Their comments about no requirements for a hotel are totally out of date. Most of us at this meeting know that is not true, and the landmark building could be just that, a promise, long overdue, delivered. This leads me nicely to a major concern, and I quote Policy 35, include a high quality landmark building in the southwest part of the site, including the A45 Northampton Road roundabout as a gateway to Rushden and Higham. I totally agree with the JDPU comment. For a gateway to be created, the building at this point needs to address the corner in a way that enlivens and enriches the space about it. A car park on this key corner with a low-rise, horizontal emphasised supermarket, even if it is one of their more prestigious designs, is not what we have in mind. The Nen Centre at Thaxton, a landmark building, and stands out as you approach from the A14 and sits nicely on the site. The Kia building across the road from the proposed site has so much more to offer. The care home is much needed, but raises concerns as to the residents' well-being if they are not able to open their windows. With the current climate, fresh air is a must. With the plethora of supermarkets, and I know it's not a planning concern, but we already have 3 within a few metres of the site and a sister unit just under 3 miles down the road. Where are all these people coming from? Even with Rushden being a growth town, we have ample provision. We have 2 more large supermarkets in town. Surely a holistic approach should be taken with all new proposals.
Sarah, interrupt, sorry, you're 3 minutes
Yes.
up. Have you got much more to say?
No, a couple of paragraphs, Chairman. Can I withdraw members' attention to page 52 of the report and the viability consultant? Surely then, if the application should be refused until they can deliver the criteria and make it sustainable.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
The last speaker, Chairman, is Mr. Barry Cansfield, who is the agent.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear us, Barry?
Can you press *6 on your phone, please, Mr. Cansfield, to unmute yourself? Mr. Cansfield, can you press *6 on your phone? Mr. Cansfield? Sorry, Chairman, he's not still
there.
muted. Hello? Mr. Cansfield? Can you hear me? Can you press *6 on your phone, please?
Oh.
Oh.
That sounds like him.
Yeah, that's it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Yes, crack on.
Fantastic. Apologies for that. Start the clock. Thank you very much. The officer's report and presentation is thorough and provides a full assessment of the scheme. However, I want to re-emphasise a number of points in relation to the issues raised tonight. Critically, the key components of the scheme have been subject to both the officer's professional interrogation, but also audits undertaken by the Council's own independent consultants. The retail element and its supporting material has been assessed by the Council's independent retail planning consultants, and a series of conditions have been suggested to ensure that the retail elements are acceptable on all fronts. Turning to the traditional employment element, notwithstanding the fact that we have applied for a flexible range of B-class uses, we have provided the Council with appropriate assurances that B1C, B2 uses have every opportunity to be the primary use for the site. A planning obligation is proposed which ensures that the units 7 to 10 will be marketed for B1C, B2 only for an 18-month period from the grant of planning permission. Again, the terms of this obligation have been audited by the Council's own independent viability consultant, who has confirmed that the marketing period is an appropriate amount of time in light of the viability issues. Significantly, this audit adopted an open book approach to ensure robustness and can withhold scrutiny. Finally, in relation to highways, the proposal is deemed acceptable by both the county and Highways England. Nonetheless, given the apparent sensitivities, a further audit was undertaken by the Council's own independent highway consultant, who was strongly concluded that the scheme is acceptable on all fronts. Given the robustness of the officer's report, underpinned by the Council's own trio of independent consultants, the application should be approved. There are a number of speakers who have raised concern about the landmark element of the scheme. These are bespoke design solutions for retail uses which are acceptable on all fronts. Aldi in particular have been significantly challenged to move away from their standard format design approach. The angle profile of the buildings will be instantly recognisable, they will be high quality materials, and they will function as a landmark, I have no doubt. Finally, given the uncertain times, I can confirm my client is desperate to get on site to deliver the development, securing up to 157 full-time equivalent construction jobs and a minimum of almost 500 jobs once implemented. This is a weighty material consideration in favour of the development, and we hope that members embrace the significant employment benefits associated with the scheme and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the speakers, is it, Jill?
Yeah, yes, that concludes the speakers, Chairman.
Right. Then let's move to the next speaker, who will be the ward member on the planning committee, which is Councillor Andy Mercer.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been leading on a series of large applications in North Rushden for the last 5-6 years, starting with Rushden Lakes, where we achieved a massive increase in employment and created a genuine landmark high quality site. For this site, I also, by coincidence, chaired the Joint Planning Committee when the JCS, the Joint Core Strategy, was approved. And I had a large measure of involvement in the construction of Policy 35. Policy 35 is key to this site. It specifies that this site shall be used for employment uses. There are a number of clauses there. Now we'll start off with the type of employment. It specifically says B1 and B2. It does not say A1, it does not say B8, it says B1 and B2. Now that would suggest to me that the application should be for B1 and B2 because that's what the policy says. However, there's a complication. If you go and check units 9 and 10, for instance, and count the parking spaces, and then compare them with the county's parking standards, which is 1 parking place per 30 square metres for B1 and 1 parking space per 50 square metres for B2, it turns out that there's way too few parking spaces allocated for B1. There is no way on earth any office company who's looking for an office space will lease premises where the parking space is clearly inadequate according to the county's standard, and they would probably want even more than that given that the public transport is very poor in the area. That means that the chances of leasing these units for B1 is minuscule. I just don't think it's possible. That just leaves B2. That changes the scenario quite significantly. That in turn means that you are looking to see whether they can find a tenant for B2. They're not looking for a tenant for B1 because they're not going to get one. That's already eliminated by the design. So it means that unless they get a tenant for B2 for those top units, it's going to be B8. Now that cuts down the chances of them finding a tenant significantly at a stroke and changes the balance of probabilities on this application. It also changes the balance of weightings that we give to various issues. So that's the first point. The second concerns the so-called high quality gateway site. a high quality landmark site to be precise. That means something that when you drive along the road, you immediately see it and you recognise it. It's something you navigate by, something that is not necessarily iconic, but something that's a high quality site that you recognise and immediately feel, I've got to my destination. It's supposed to imbue people with a good feeling, and it's supposed to enable people to find the area very easily. If a foreign visitor is coming along, you should be able to spot something and say, that's what I'm looking for. Now, I don't see how a low single story, unadorned side of a supermarket meets that criterion. It's very hard to see how you can claim that is either a landmark site or let alone a high quality landmark site. It may be high quality by the standards of a discount retailer, which I note our retail consultant says this has to be. It can't be another type of retailer, but it's very hard to see how you can be compatible between a discount retailer and a high quality landmark site. It's not impossible. It is possible. Retail sites can be landmark sites and can be very high quality. For instance, Tesco's and Waitrose have both got very attractive, very distinctive frontages, and you know when you've seen them, you spot them from a distance and think, that's it. That is not the case with what we have seen in the mock-ups for this design. So first of all, it's very hard for me to see how a retailer and potentially quite likely warehousing meets the requirement of the policy where it says B1 or B2, and it is even harder for me to see how this meets the criterion that we should have a high quality landmark site. The agent can say it as many times as he likes, but it doesn't make it convincing. You look at the mock-ups and you think that isn't it. He's obviously looking at something different to me. Now, I'd be happy to hear what other members have to say, but given what I've just said, it is hard to see how this is compatible with policy 35 of the Joint Core Strategy. And I'd also add that if you look at what the JPDU has written, on page 55 of the officer report, it says, this is taken from the Joint Core Strategy. Key landmark buildings should be provided to the southwest part of the site, including the A45/Northampton Road Junction, to create a significant gateway feature to Rushden and Higham Ferrers. This is not a significant gateway feature. I'll also point out, it's on page 24 of the officer report. The JDPU, that's the Joint Planning and Delivery Unit for North Northamptonshire, are right. Members expressed a strong preference for B1 and B2 uses due to their important gateway status at this site. This was referring to the member debate during the adoption of the Joint Core Strategy. There was a very clear consensus amongst members when they voted for policy 35, and this references it. Further, page 26 of the officer report. Once again, it says, this is the conclusion from the Joint Planning and Delivery Unit. It says, there is concern and that an unacceptable amount of B8 could eventually come forward on this site. So they were anticipating that at an early stage that someone would try and get B8 onto the site. B8 is specifically not mentioned in policy 35. It says B1 and B2. It does not say B8. And yet we are being asked to approve B8. I'd like to hear what other members have to say, but it does seem to me that we have several robust reasons for refusal here. And it looks to me that this is hard to justify, particularly after I discovered that the amount of parking that had been allocated was not compatible with B1 on those top northeast units.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Jill Mercer, I think you're down to speak, aren't you?
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much. On the detailed level, having the supermarket at that entrance throws up a problem, because the lorries that are delivering to it will have to go across the pedestrian crossing. The officer sent us a mock-up of the swept path analysis, which shows that the HGVs have to cross the pedestrian crossing to get to the store. That we may be able to mitigate that, but that is a problem. There's no question that this is not a high quality landmark building. The question is that strong enough reason to refuse it? 2 years ago, the developers came and did a pre-act briefing, and we told them our thoughts on that. They've taken no notice. They just hung on to the fact they've got an Aldi, as it was someone who was willing to sign up, and they just improved the materials. We wanted something with height, something like the turrets on Waitrose, which is within sight of this building. I don't know if there's any other solution to that, but certainly this is not what we were looking for. The extra traffic fills me with dread, and yet another supermarket. As we've heard before from other speakers, we've got a Lidl right opposite, we've got a Waitrose, Asda, Home Bargains within a stone's throw, all on this side of the town. In fact, there aren't really many on the other side of town. There are also, as we've heard, quite a few entrances on this road, and then there's this new site opposite with 80 houses, and then 2 bus stops which are going to cause traffic jams of their own. The local housing highways authority asked for £1,000 from each house on that 80 development, housing development, but they haven't asked for any from this development. There is no bus, and there's no prospect of any bus. In view of the comment in the JCS policy 10.47 that they should ensure this site is well served by public transport and that there should be a transport and movement strategy, I wondered if we might have been able to insist on money towards a bus, but we haven't. I don't even know if there's a transport movement strategy. I'd be delighted if they could help pay for enhancements at the Screwbridge roundabout, as has been suggested, putting £80,000 towards it. But I worry that we might lose that, as we've been hit before when Section 106 monies have been allocated for something and then they've not happened in the right time frame. And so perhaps the officer could tell us, if it was passed, how we would protect this money, because those works are not due to go ahead for some time, as the Highways England have said. They've said perhaps 3 years to work on something, and then they've got to find some funding. I'm glad the officers have added the TV interference clause, because we had a problem quite close to here with houses losing their TV until the council, in fact Councillor Mercer, had to pay for it out of his empowering funds to buy satellite dishes for them. I was concerned to start with about noise, but then when we went to Dun Close, it was so noisy from the A45. I don't think there'd be any extra noise from this development. However, there is a thick line of trees there. I would want to make sure that those trees did stay, and Dean did mention that there was a possibility of some more trees going in along that barrier. Now, they made an estimate of 486 full-time jobs, and in the update sheet it said that that was estimated for B8. So they've factored in that they're going to get B8 here. Otherwise, why would they say the number of jobs for B8? They haven't applied for B8. They've said that they're only going to get B8 if they can't market it. But they've given us the figures for B8, so they've made up their minds. My major concern is this B8 and the marketing. They've been trying to get people to sign up for this for 2 years. Are they really expecting us to understand that in another 18 months they're going to get someone to sign up for it? The JPU, or JDU, I think it's called, are also unhappy about that. And as they wrote the joint core strategy, it's obviously out of step with what they thought. The reason we don't want B8 is because it doesn't have the number of high quality jobs. The HGV movements are greater, which puts the stress on the roads, and they're unsightly. Councillor Peacock mentioned that perhaps if they were given permission, that if they came back in, say, 18 months or even 12 months, having not managed to sell it, then we could look at it again. But certainly in with that clause in the Section 106 agreement, I don't think is viable. I don't think we should give somebody permission for something when A, they don't really intend to do it, but also that I don't think they've got any prospect of it. And also in the update sheet, the officers said that they hadn't sought any weight restrictions. Now, obviously, they didn't seek weight restrictions because it wasn't on the basis of B8. But if they've obviously factored in that they're going to have B8, if they did get this permission today, then they could go ahead. B8 would go through on the nod because they won't get the sign up for the B1 or B2, and that will have implications for lorries going through the centre of our towns. So that at the very least, we would want to have restrictions on lorries, which way they were able to go, and we can't impose that at the moment because the local highway authority haven't asked for that because they're assuming it's not going to be B8. Overall, a very poor application.
Thank you, Jill. I haven't got anyone else in the chat room wanting to speak.
Oh, Chairman, Councillor Pentland would like to speak.
Okay, Councillor Pentland first, but then Robin and Dudley.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, in the points that I wanted to raise, I did want to highlight that I fully appreciate the need in this uncertain time for jobs to be brought forward. And I appreciate also that this site is going to be developed at some point in the future, as other councillors have highlighted. However, I believe there has been a gross underestimation of the highways impacts that there are potential for with this development. Looking at the number of roundabouts proposed for this small stretch of road, it seems to me that soon there'll be more roundabouts here than there are in Milton Keynes. And as local road users, we all know how difficult and how congested this junction of roads can become at all different times. And throughout the report, it tends to look at this and say that it's not a material consideration. But I think at some point you've got to take this as a material consideration. And where does it end, considering the specific uses that are documented for this application? I did wonder if we could have some clarification on a point raised by one of the speakers, in particular Councillor Gardner's points regarding the care home and the specific uses of that, and whether we did need extra information, as she highlighted. I'd like to finish by saying that I agree with the points that have been raised by Councillor Andy Mercer and Councillor Jill Mercer regarding the B8 uses, but I think we should also be highlighting the highways as well. But I do have real concerns.
Thank you, Councillor. Let's move now to Robin Underwood, Councillor Underwood.
Thank you, Chairman.
And Dudley.
On the update sheet, there was a swept path analysis for two types of lorry. Now, I spent a half an hour trying to study this, and I'd like the officer to confirm, does the lorries have to reverse into the site, and do the lorries have to reverse out of the site? Now, we spoke about this at the briefing, so I would like confirmation that the lorries can come out to go into the site forward and come out of the site in a forward manner. because reversing out onto a roundabout is not a good idea. So when it comes to the officers, or the officer, could he clarify what the swept path analysis in the update sheet means?
Okay, thank you, Robin. Dudley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, in the last analysis, it seems to me what we're going to do end up with a home for elderly people or people who are ill, who can't even open their windows. So they're going to have no life at all when they can't go outside, because there won't be any outside area because of all the lorries going right past and so on. And going past their door is likely to be big trucks going to this B8 unit. Well, it seems to me that doesn't seem a very good combination, really, and it seems a crazy idea to put these home right on the edge of on a motorway, as it really is, and next to an access to a B8 building, which is what it's likely to be, because you've excluded so many things from these other units, what they can be used for, that they're almost certainly going to end up with that. So I think it's a very bad combination and a very ill thought out building.
Thank you, Dudley. I think, Barbara, you wish to speak, do you? Barbara Jenny?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think perhaps Councillor Wilkes was ahead of me. If he's happy for me to go.
You carry on. I'll get to him next.
Okay, thank you. Well, I support the comments made by Councillor Gill and Andy Mercer. I think they're well-made points. I also think that the comments made by the first speaker were very enlightening as regards articulated lorries passing through these pinch points effectively. What concerns me still is that the opening to this site, the access, is an area which sees the most pedestrian movement, and whilst we welcome the startup units and the small business units, there will be a lot of industrial traffic going through to this site and passing through where there is this area of high pedestrian movement. If that moves within 18 months or after an 18-month period to B8 with much bigger vehicles going through, then this becomes even more of a concern. Councillor Andy Mercer did allude to the joint course strategy or the comments by the Joint Planning Development Unit. I would like to point out at 6.22 of their comments on page 25, where they question the landmark building. They do make the comment in the third paragraph down that this building, which is a corner feature, should have vertical rather than horizontal emphasis. However well designed it may be, I'm afraid it does not meet that brief. A flat, low building does not meet the brief that we were looking for. It was a high definition building. They may have used the word landmark within the joint course strategy, but the spirit of that was that it was to be a significant landmark building, and I'm afraid what we have had presented does not fit that brief. I'm sure colleagues will have other comments to make, so I will wait with interest to hear their views.
Thank you, Barbara. Councillor Wilkes.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, let me say that I agree with Councillor Pentland. I too appreciate that job creation is a good thing. And I too appreciate that this land is going to be developed at some stage. And I don't have any issues with that. However, I am seriously concerned by Highways England's comments that if this development goes ahead, traffic queues are expected to increase by 120 metres at peak times. Now, I know this area well and it's busy, but a 120 metre extra length of parking is going to cause gridlock. I'm also concerned that residents of Don Close will have a potential 24-hour B8 warehouse roughly 50 metres away. That's a 24-hour B8 warehouse next door to a child's open bedroom window. Of course, it may be simply that having an elevated B8 warehouse towering over them and their gardens is what causes more anxiety. But these potential B8 warehouses are really close to people's houses. Thirdly, I don't understand how the small number of parking spaces, I'd like officer confirmation, I think it's as small as 20, can be sufficient for a 60-bedroom care home with 62 potential full-time staff. But then, of course, listening to Councillor Andy Mercer, it would appear that overall there's a woeful lack of parking for all of the units on this proposed development, whether that's the care home, the A-class, the B1, the B2 or the B8 units. So finally, Chairman, can officers confirm whether I'm right? Is the potential 24-hour elevated B8, this Unit 9, really only 50 odd metres away from the closest house on Don Close? And are there really only 20 odd parking spaces for a 60-bed, 62 staff care home? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Bert, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. One of my concerns is the Northampton Road. It would appear that they are ignoring the 80 houses that are due to be constructed, presumably quite shortly, because the government is trying to chase as many houses as possible. Northampton Road is not a particularly wide road, and yet they're proposing to have bus stops on the main road. So some of these buses can stop there for about 5 minutes while they're taking change from various people or looking at their pass cards. And at that time, all the cars have to pile up behind them, which causes then a logjam for some considerable time. I would have thought we need bus laybys, one on either side. That way, at least the traffic isn't held up at that point. Also, they've got to try and improve the pavement area all the way along. At this moment in time, there is just a very narrow pavement on one side. We are going to need pavements on both sides of that road to accommodate the people who actually walk that way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bert. Councillor Andy Mercer, you're waving. Are you going to make a proposal or do you want to comment first?
I want to comment first, Chairman. One of the previous briefings, I asked questions about the swept path analysis for the delivery lorry for the supermarket. We've now been given diagrams showing the swept path analysis, and it confirms some of my concerns. For those who can see it, there is a pedestrian crossing going from the parking area and from further inside the site to the Unit 1. That crossing joins up roughly to where the disabled parking bays are. Well, the lorry that does the deliveries either has to reverse over that crossing when it's going in, or it has to reverse over that crossing when it's leaving. One of the things you just don't do is have HGVs reverse over pedestrian crossings. It's one of the golden rules. It's a quick way of getting a death toll. So that particular part of it is very, very dubious. I would suggest that some of the detailed design would need a lot of revision. Secondly, when the lorries leave that site, that position, they appear to clip part of the non-highway as they leave as well. The swept path analysis shows it going over part of the non-highway. So I just don't see that this is, how can I put it, fully got all the technical details sorted out, even if you accept the principle of the design. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any more member comments? Peter, you're mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, thank you, Chairman. I don't think for 1 minute the Northampton Road can cope with the amount of traffic that's going to go in and out of this site. And my question really is, could not the site be accessed from the A45? I'd like an answer to that, please. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other member questions or comments before I pass to the officer?
Barbara Jenny has asked to make a comment, please.
Barbara?
Yes, I'd just like to comment on Andy's last, Councillor Andy Mercer's last remark, where he referred to the crossing that the lorry would have to stop over when it makes its delivery. From what I can see, it's not actually disabled parking that it pulls up alongside. It is mother and baby parking. So that gives rise to more concern with small children and parents trying to load those children. I'm not sure how many deliveries are expected, but that does become more of a concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Is that all from members? In which case I'll pass to the officer, the case officer involved, Dean Wishart, to answer all the questions. He's got quite a mouthful to handle, hasn't he? Dean, are you happy with all of that?
Delighted. Thank you, Chair. I'll go through them in order, from starting from who spoke first from the speakers, and then going through the member questions. I'm not going to respond to all those who spoke from members of the public, because a lot of what was said was objections and issues that have been raised that have been taken account of in the report already. So I'm not going to rehash all of those things now. But the first point I would draw attention to, which has been mentioned by members as well, is about the care home parking. And there are a high number of staff proposed for that care home, but of course they aren't all going to be there at the same time. You would need to divide that by, I'd have thought, a minimum of 3 shifts. So that would divide the number of parking spaces by 3. You're still going to have not many left for visitors, etc. But it's not a case of fitting 60 staff into 20 spaces. It's not as severe as that. The next point I would raise, Councillor Maxwell mentioned about the report that the Friends of Higham and Rushden had commissioned by Graham Eves not being taken into account. That has been taken into account before Highways England and the local highway authority came to us with their final comments. So that has been taken into account. We wanted to make sure that when we presented the application to you this evening, that we had all our I's dotted and T's crossed as far as technical matters on highways were concerned. Turning to Councillor Andy Mercer's point on the parking standards of the County Council and B1C, as it used to be called, it's now called Use Class E, unhelpfully, but for the purposes of this discussion, I'll talk about it as B1 because that's what we're all familiar with. It's quite right that the units 7, 8, 9 and 10, well, we only discussed units 9 and 10 earlier on, but they would fall short of the parking spaces as shown in the county's parking standards. They're not adopted by ENC, but they are the closest thing we have to that. So it's guidance only, not sort of statute or legislation, anything like that. But they are the standards that we try and go by. So for B2 and B8 uses, it would meet those. There would be sufficient parking. But it's quite right that there would not be enough for B1. B1C, that is. But I have discussed this with the applicant's agent in between our conversation, Councillor Mercer, and the meeting this evening, and they are willing to a condition in advance of the marketing period commencing for that additional parking to be provided to them to be able to prove that they can do that. That looks particularly easy on Unit 10 because you could just add an extra deck onto what's already there. It's quite linear, and you'd be able to do something similar with Unit 9 because even with 2 decks of parking, it's still not going to be any taller than the actual buildings, and you've still got the distance between both buildings and the nearest properties at Don Close. And what I can share with members would like is some of the photographs that I took from Don Close this week that shows the very strong tree line between Don Close and I say this site because not all of it is this site, but there is a strong tree belt between Don Close and the application site. Moving on to Councillor Jill Mercer's comments about bus improvements and Skew Bridge roundabout money. Schedule 2, sorry, Appendix 2 from the committee report does show that there will be 2 bus stops shown on Northampton Road on the plan that showed on the presentation. Contribution towards the existing Crown Way bus stop, which is the one I think by the bridge for Rushton Lakes, and also a contribution for, actually I don't think I've even put it in here, unless it's on the other page. No, sorry, it isn't here, I beg your pardon, it's the very first one. An £80,000 contribution towards future Skew Bridge roundabout improvements. That's money to go to the local highway authority rather than to Highways England. And there would be a clawback position on that, usually around 10 years. So if the money was not spent within 10 years, then it would have to be repaid. Councillor Jill Mercer's point on the job creation being based on B8 and that having been their mind made up. The way I look at that and the way it was portrayed to us and to me through the update sheet is they've based those job projections on a worst case scenario, and B8 would provide the lowest number of jobs per square metre because each person has a lot more space in a warehouse than they would in an office, which is why the requirements for parking are higher for an office or a B2 than they are for a factory. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's a mind made up scenario. It's they've based it on worst case scenarios that B8 would provide a lower amount of employment per square metre than an office or an office being B1 and general industrial being B2. So that's why they've come in with a conservative estimate on that rather than trying to over anticipate what there would be and then disappointing at the other end by not providing as many jobs as would be as would be desired. Just going through my list. Sorry, there's quite a lot to get through here, so just please bear with me. The County Council also, they have always been aware of B8 because there was a point about weight restrictions and why the county had not asked for those, not being aware of B8. B8 was in the description of development from day one, so they will have assessed it on that basis. They will have had to have done it. It's inherent within the description. So that has always been there. It's not a new issue that's come to light later on. That's been there since 2018 when the application was first lodged. And even with the change to the description that I'm proposing in the update sheet, B8 stays on there. It's not a hidden issue by any stretch. Coming to Councillor Harriet Pentland's comment about the sort of lots of roundabouts, the Milton Keynes scenario, would it be fair to say if members are not happy with the scheme overall, that the layout of the highway improvements proposed are of concern? Because we've already had very strong comments from our independent assessment, consultant, to say that it would not be reasonable to refuse the application on the technical matters of highways, but taking on board Councillor Pentland's point of there being several roundabouts, the Skew Bridge roundabout, the Little roundabout, and now this potential new roundabout, all being in close proximity and the sort of manoeuvring around those, that it's the layout aspect of that that is probably maybe more of concern. That's a point for members to consider. Going on to Councillor Robin Underwood's point about the swept path analysis, I can show the plan actually, which I hope will help. Let me just try and share the screen without everything freezing like it did last time. Okay, can everyone see the PDF?
Yes.
Okay, so on the left-hand side of the PDF, and Councillor Barbara Jenny was right that those are the parent and child spaces, just where my cursor is hovering. The vehicle delivery bay is here. The vehicle would drive in forwards into the site to this point here, and we would then reverse back into the delivery bay. The right-hand side shows how they would exit, and they would exit forwards. Now the area here, which I think Councillor Andy Mercer referred to as clipping non-highway, none of this is highway. This is all the demise within the Unit 1. And you can see there's two lines here, the line around the green area and then the sort of dashed line. The green line would be where the curb line would be. The rest of it would be paint in the same way that the crossing would be painted so that the vehicle is able to cut that corner, but it's clear that it's not part of the grassed area. It's not that they're going to be chewing the curb up every time they exited the site. So I hope that clarifies on the point for Councillor Robin Underwood.
Dean, can I just ask?
Sure.
There's a zebra crossing. There's a crossing there. That lorries would have to back over the crossing.
They would, yeah. And that was a point I was going to come on to. I haven't got as far as Jenny's comments just yet. But yes, that, in fact, I'll share it again because I think it's probably useful to show that in context, in fairness. So yeah, there is just making sure you can all see that again. Yep. There was a crossing here, just where my cursor is, where if you were walking to the site from the east side of Northampton Road, perhaps from the coffee shop or from the care home, etc., one of the routes you could take to this store would be to walk along this footpath here, cross these zebras, along here, then you're into the supermarket. Another route, if you were at this other shop here, you would walk across these zebras in that way. A third route, which I haven't got on this plan, but I will show it on a different one. Oh, whoops. Is you would also be able to come along Northampton Road and walk into the site this way, so you could completely avoid it. If you were to, for example, live in one of the existing or new properties proposed along Northampton Road, you would not have to go that way. You could choose to, but you don't have to. Just going through the rest of the comments. Councillor Jackson referred to bus laybys and extra paths on both sides. The county haven't asked for the laybys, and what we have is what is proposed on-street bus stops. Currently, there is no bus service that I understand serves Northampton Road, but yeah, they're not intending for them to be laybys at this stage. As for extra paths on both sides, that would be provided. There are footpath improvements proposed on both sides of the road, and I can share plans showing that if you would prefer me to. Have I missed somebody's comments out? Just want to make sure I've captured everybody's. Councillor Jenny mentioned about the pedestrian and HGV mix. I think I covered that in the point when I was discussing the swept path. And Councillor Thomas asked about access from the A45. Sorry, direct access to the A45. The policy specifically does say, policy 35 of the Joint Core Strategy, that access should be solely from Northampton Road. And my understanding is the only point they would be able to access it from on the A45 would be adjacent to the RPC site, and there is no appetite from them to allow that to happen. So that element of the layout is policy compliant because it does provide access solely from the A45. I think that's all the points.
I did ask about a care home that has no windows and is going to be right with presumably no green space either. That's all that is.
The very final point I was going to say, thank you, Councillor Hughes, was that we do have Mandy Dennis here from our Environmental Protection Department, who I think is probably better placed to answer questions on the amenity of that care home than I am. So if it's okay with you, Chair, I'd like to pass over to Mandy. Is that okay?
Please do. That's lovely. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, councillors. A number of you have raised concerns or comments with respect to the care home and the window situation. When the original application came in, Environmental Protection did object to it on the grounds of noise, because we considered it at that point, without any further information from the applicant, that it was going to be a care home in the traditional sense, where the residents would be fairly able-bodied, they'd be wandering around in their rooms, they would want to go outside. However, based on the updated use in that it will be a high intensity care unit, they will be proposing to have an air handling unit which will allow for a comfortable temperature to be maintained at all times for the residents, and a sufficient supply of ventilation for them. The windows won't be sealed shut. They will still be able to open their windows. However, there may be a resultant increase in noise levels because of that. And then because of the change in the type of occupant that would live there, Environmental Protection did actually then remove our objection to it. So if I can just reiterate, they will be able to open their windows, they won't be sealed shut, but should they do so, there may be a higher level of noise within the building. I trust that answers your questions. Councillor Wilkes brought up the matter of Don Close and the proximity of Don Close to Unit B9 in particular. and potential for noise from the B9 unit, from unit B9. We did work very hard with the applicant to change the layout of the unit 9 to ensure that the service area was furthest away from Don Close, so that any resultant noise from that would have less impact. Of interest is that the very building of this development, should it go ahead, will actually provide a significant noise barrier to the properties in Northampton Road and in Don Close. And we were very careful that any reduction in traffic noise, I think both councillors Mercer's visited and commented on the high level of traffic noise, is that we did not want any benefits from the barrier effect from the buildings to result in a higher impact from any industrial noise that might happen. So we were very careful to make sure that there should be a less impact, and should the development go ahead, the acoustic modelling demonstrates that the resultant noise levels at Don Close and Northampton Road should be significantly less, providing that the mitigation measures agreed with the applicant in the way of noise barriers are installed. I hope that helps in your determination.
Thank you, Mandy. Before I go back to Dean for more explanations, I have a note here that the legal officer would like to say something to us. Stephen, are you ready?
Thank you, Chairman. Evening, members. Those that were present last night would have heard the first part of what I'm going to say, and that is that when any recommendation is made or decisions are made by members contrary to officers' recommendations, then there is a potential cost implication. However, what I should have said yesterday, and I'm going to make sure I say tonight, is that the committee is fully entitled to take decisions that are contrary to the officers' recommendations based on their concerns. And there's been a very lengthy and detailed debate this evening, as usual. However, one thing I would just like to emphasise, and I know that Dean, the case officer's already emphasised this, is that if members are minded to vote against this application, please do not include any reference whatsoever to highways. There's been a very long discussion about highway concerns, and I appreciate those concerns. However, it has already been spelt out by the independent highways consultant that that will not be a sustainable ground. So please be mindful and give thought as to the reasons you would like to refuse it if you choose to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that comment. Andy, you've taken that on board, I'm sure. Dean, back to you for, have you answered most of the questions? Well, you haven't answered them all, because
answered, I would like
buildings and great big wonderful structures rather than glass fronts.
I think on matters of the landmark buildings, etc., that's a matter that's going to have to that will need to be down to the committee's judgment. You know, the case has been made quite, you know, robustly in the report, we feel, on the landmark buildings and the general layout and the interaction with the surroundings. I don't intend to reiterate that here, because that is my belief still. But what I would ask members to also factor in that, you know, we haven't shied away from the fact that B8 uses could be prolific on this site potentially in the future, and that there is some conflict with policy 35. We're not shying away from that as officers at all, but applications need to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And there are other material considerations to consider, and I would suggest that the economic benefits of the sites, in particular the circumstances we find ourselves in at the moment, is something that needs to be given serious consideration also. But I don't think I have anything else to mention at this point, unless there are any other specific questions that members would like me to respond.
I've got one, Dean, just at the moment.
Sure.
If in 18 months' time they haven't got their B2, B1 clients, they're saying it'll be B8 as far as they're concerned. Would the application come back to us at that stage to consider B8?
That's not the intention. No, the intention would be that after the 18-month period, if they've not managed to secure somebody from B1 or B2, they could then also market it for B8. Not that they would exclude B1 and B2 from it, but they could then include B8 as part of their marketing. But there was no intention. The choice now has got to be based upon it could be B8. Yes, it could be B8, and I think hopefully the report is clear that is a potential scenario. But the intention was not to bring it back to committee to determine that further, on the basis that we'd sought independent advice on that, and they concluded that 18 months was reasonable. Anything beyond that would risk the viability of the site.
But they didn't conclude B8 is acceptable.
Sorry, they concluded that if within the marketing period, if they weren't able to secure B1 or B2 and or B2 tenants for those units 7, 8, 9, and 10, it could then be be reasonable to market it for B8 as well.
Fine. Lee, you want to speak again?
Thank you, Chairman. I do, just because there was, I just need some clarification. My question wasn't quite answered. It may be that I didn't ask the question properly. So Dean is absolutely right, of course. I mentioned that there were 62 staff for the care home, and Dean quite rightly said, of course, there aren't 62 staff at any one time. There probably will be shifts. And as the update sheet says, it really isn't 62 staff, it's 80 employees, because it's just 62 full-time positions. So there are 80 employees spread probably across 3 shifts. So that's 27 staff. So my question really was, so those 27 staff, obviously there's going to be visitors as well. Those 27 staff, and where do they park? There's no on-street parking. There's no public car parks. There's 20 spaces. Where do they park?
Dean?
I'm afraid I can't answer that in its entirety, because I wouldn't know the particulars of each and every potential member of staff or visitor to that site. It may be the case that, being part-time workers, etc., if it's described as full-time equivalents, there could be part-time roles also as well. Maybe not everybody drives to the site. Maybe they walk or cycle because they live nearby. There aren't that many spaces there. I do appreciate that, but that has been tested by the Highway Authority as far as they're concerned in relation to their parking standards, and they haven't found against the application on that point. So it is what it is, and members will need to weigh whether it's acceptable or not in their opinion.
Chairman, there are a couple of people waiting to come back, myself included.
Go on,
if
then,
I
Jill.
could speak now, that would be fine. I was going to pick up the point that Councillor Wilkes has said about that parking, because that I hadn't picked it up particularly beforehand, but that does worry me, because not only are there possibly not enough spaces for the staff, you're going to have health visitors and doctors and other health professionals, let alone visitors to visit their loved ones. So that does strike me as a very low number of parking spaces. But the thing that really struck me with Dean's replies and absolutely horrified me is that a lorry has to reverse, no matter which way you go, it has to reverse over a pedestrian crossing. Now, I can't see why that's been allowed to go forward from an transport audit point of view. That really, it can't be a good suggestion. I mean, obviously, all the other things we've spoken about, but on the detailed level, those two really worry me.
Thank you, Jill. Who else wants to speak?
Barbara's next, I think.
Barbara, shoot.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, my point is I'm going to come back to the landmark building and the requirement within the joint core strategy. I realise a proposal hasn't yet been made. I'm not convinced that absolutely that there is an appetite to grant this application, but if members were so minded, the retail impact assessment does also suggest there is impact on the town centres. But the landmark building has been a critical point throughout this process. To help mitigate that, I would like to propose that there is some piece of sculpture or art that can be put in place at this lowest point of the site that would create a landmark. and a significant gateway to the site. So I just ask members to bear that in mind, if it could be included as part of the 106 agreement, if members are so minded to grant the application.
Before I pass to Andy for a proposal, including, that would be a very big statue to be a landmark. Are there anyone else wishing to speak? Dean?
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on Councillor Jenny's point about potential sculpture. If members are pivoting one way or the other on this application based on the landmark aspect of it, if they felt that a sculpture or some kind of structure would overcome the landmark concern, then it would be reasonable, in my opinion, to impose what we'd probably describe as a public art condition, where we'd require the details of something to go in that location to provide that landmark. So that is a reasonable suggestion by Councillor Jenny.
Thank you, Dean. That's
Well, I
great.
say so, Chairman. The most likely thing we'll get is a big Aldi sign, like we've got a big little sign in Rushden.
Okay. Any other comments before we go to Andy? Right, we had a good debate. Thank you very much. Andy, can I have a proposal, please?
Well, I'd like to make just a couple of comments myself first. The first one is that the reversing issue indicates to me that this needs more work, this design, and ideally it shouldn't have come to committee this early. They should have done some more work on that reversing issue. Second point is that lay-bys, the County Council Highways Department have gone out their way to block lay-bys for buses. One of their highways engineers told me to my face that they preferred not to have lay-bys because they cause if you don't have a lay-by, it causes a traffic jam, and if there's a traffic jam, it creates modal shift, which was their objective, and it's never been reversed, that position. Now, as regards this site, I'm not going to mention highways issues. As the legal officer has pointed out, we don't have a leg to stand on that. However, policy 35 is very explicit. It says B1 and B2. This has got a mixture of A1, B1, B2, B8. That doesn't match that policy, and that is a clear reason for refusal. Right, secondly, the high quality landmark building, it definitely isn't at the gateway location, and that's not just my opinion, that's from the JPDU's opinion as well. They refer to the need for vertical pointers there, vertical lines, as well as instead of horizontal ones. They're speaking as experts, which we are not. They are experts on the subject we're talking about. They are the experts, and they have made that opinion. I would therefore suggest that we could refuse this without risk of getting costs on those two reasons, because they are both specifically referred to in the policy 35, and we have expert support on the latter of the two. However, if we do refuse this, I would like to suggest that we send an informative to the applicant that there is no objection whatsoever to employment use on this site. We fully support that, but that this is not a particularly good application. If you're going to have B8, which we don't like at all, you shouldn't have it going right through, the lorries having to go right through the middle of the site to get to the exit. And you shouldn't have a situation where the delivery lorry to the retail unit has to reverse across a pedestrian crossing. Whichever way it goes in, it's reversing across it. I mean, I'm just astonished that this got to this stage without anyone objecting to that. That just seems to me to be so obvious. It's not a highways issue, that, because it's within the site, but it's still very bad design. So therefore, I'm proposing that we refuse this for the two reasons I mentioned under policy 35.
Can I have a seconder for
I'll
that?
second that, Chairman. Robin Underwood.
Can I come back in on that just briefly?
Just do.
So just want to just to make sure I've got this down correctly before members take their vote. I've got down here, so sort of non-policy compliant uses in relation to policy 35, not a high quality landmark building, and layout concerns.
I didn't add layout concerns as a reason for refusal. That is merely my personal opinion. That would not be sustainable on appeal.
Well, the reason I mention it, Councillor, is because layout is a material consideration, and members have debated it quite some length about the concern about the manoeuvrability within that aspect of Unit 1. So I wouldn't say that I wouldn't consider it unreasonable to raise layout concerns if members are minded to refuse.
If you feel that is okay, I would be happy to add that. Although personally, I wouldn't have pushed it forward because I don't have the expert opinion, expert qualifications in that field.
The reason I wanted to mention it is because it's a specific point that's been debated at length. It's not a woolly reason with no substance. It's a specific concern that several members have raised. So I would have 3 potential refusal reasons if that's how members are minded to vote. So layout being the one I've just mentioned, the non-policy compliant uses, and the lack of high quality landmark building or buildings. Would that be accurate?
I'd be happy with that. You've done very, very well there, sir.
Okay, thank you.
We've had that proposal and we've had it seconded. So we now go to a vote. We'll do the same vote as we did last night. And I'll ask you to say yes to the refusal of this application based upon the 3 areas, or no if you want the proposal to go ahead. So can we have a vote for yes? Can you shout up?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Can we have a no suggestion? And if you don't like the proposal, anyone abstaining? And that's unanimously carried. Thank you. Well thought out.
Thank you very much.
That concludes the meeting. It's the only one for tonight. Dean, thank you very much for your clear and concise comments. It really does help us.
Thank you.
Hope we haven't given you too much more work. But that's it. So I'll close the meeting. Thank you all for your...
Chairman, just before we go, could we just ask for, Dean, you need to listen to this, ask for the reasons for refusal to just be run past yourself and myself and the ward member? Just to the wording.
When you've got the actual words down, Dean. For the...
Well, he's got the gist of it, yeah.
Yeah. But when you've got the actual words...
I'll circulate those in the coming days.
If you could, thank you very much.
Your physical words, so you haven't snuck anything in there. Okay, meeting's closed. Thank you very much, all of you. See you again soon.
Good night.
Good night,
all. Good night, everybody.
Charlie, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here. I don't know who